Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. This week's guest is Reed Fischer. Reed runs for Tinman Elite based in Boulder, Colorado. In this week's episode, we talked a lot about Tinman and how they approach training, social media, and connecting with fans. We dove into how it was formed and the sponsorship setup. Reed also answered some lighter questions like who each athlete would be as a Marvel character. Getting back to Reed, we talked about the progression of miles and how he takes a long-term oriented approach versus chasing shorter-term goals. We covered a lot of fan-submitted questions on this one, and it's clear that Tinman has a very active and engaged audience. A lot of Reed's answers were very practical tips and suggestions that all runners should listen to. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back. I am here in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. We're sitting outside on a beautiful blue sky day. We're here with Reed Fischer. Reed, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Of course. So do you want to give a little intro on yourself and what brought you out to Boulder?
Sure. So I'm originally from Hopkins, Minnesota is where I went to high school, and then went to Drake University down in Des Moines, Iowa, and then upon graduating, kind of did a tour of the U.S. trying to decide where I wanted to end up, and I trained out in Boulder for a summer and kind of got put in touch with Drew Hunter and some of the other guys that are now formerly known as Tinman, and kind of decided that this is where I was going to be happiest. So moved out here in the fall of 2017 and have been loving it ever since.
Cool. So let's talk about Tinman. You guys seem to have some raving fans. You're doing amazing things, both on social and the roads and all that good stuff. As I was saying before we started recording here, I've never had so many people reply with questions, and so it seems like you've got quite the engaged audience here.
Yeah, it's been cool. I think that was something that we a little bit expected, but have also been taken aback by. I think we knew when we started to try and push out some of our story and see if people would respond to it, we were expecting a pretty healthy response just because we kind of fill a void in the sport. We're young and we're exciting and we're doing things our own way. And I think a lot of what we see in elite American distance running right now tends to be very, curated look, and you only see the good days. There's not a lot of room for fun-loving running guys. And so fortunately, people have really responded to what we've been doing, and it's been an absolute blessing to watch it take off the way it has. And it's been, one heck of a ride that we're continuing to ride out. And, we've got some big dreams going forward and things we want to make happen for ourselves as athletes, ourselves as a team, and for the sport of running as a whole. So it's exciting.
Cool. Were any of you marketing majors? Where did it come from?
Yeah. So Sam Parsons has been really the driving force. He came from a marketing background, spent a summer interning at Adidas in sports marketing for their, I think it was tennis department, and then has been able to kind of apply his background. And he's also just a very driven person, so that helps a lot. And then I work in kind of a supporting role. I come from a more public relations and English background. Those were my majors at Drake. So I'm able to kind of take Sam's business-focused, more overarching macro level stuff and really hone in and find the stories and the threads that we can pull out of that and tell in a good way. So we work really well as a team. And then we're fortunate that Connor Winter, who's joined us last summer, comes from a very entrepreneurial business background. He has his own endeavor right now called Shoe Sense that he's pursuing. So he's very familiar with the ins and outs of starting a company. So he's been able to help with some of the financial and logistical aspects of things. So, we're very much a startup. We like to joke that, when we're hand packing orders and writing handwritten notes to the people who've purchased some of our apparel and things like that, it truly is. It's like you're getting Drew Hunter's stuffing your envelope and shipping it out to you.
Sweat and tears.
Exactly.
Maybe no blood, but
yeah, no blood yet. But yeah, it's been fun. I think we're all, kind of taking things a day at a time and looking forward as much as we can. And using our skill sets that we each have individually, like everything every person on this team brings something to the table that we're able to use for the greater good. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of work together as a team, both in running and on more of the quote unquote business side of things.
Cool. How did Tinman form? Was it, you guys saw an emoji, on the iPhone, saw the cool logo and said, let's do this?
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
So the team itself was founded in the fall of 2017. It was initially just so Morgan Pearson, who's now a triathlete and lives with me and does most of our running training with us still. He was coached by Coach Tom Schwartz upon graduating from CU Boulder. And then Drew has been coached by Coach Tom since he was in high school. And then when I was looking at coaches, Tom really stuck out to me. So the three of us were kind of a impromptu training group in Boulder. And then Sam arrived shortly thereafter, and we ended up winning club cross country championships and thinking, okay, well, let's try and make something legit out of this. So, Sam and I built the website. We started the Instagram page, and we reached out to Bobby Peavy, who's a local trail runner and Georgetown graduate. And he designed our logo for us. And, we kind of wanted to have something to kind of rally around and have something that was concrete and represented who we wanted to be as a team. And then we started scrolling through our iPhones, and we're like, okay, let's figure out a way that we can kind of brand this and make an icon and a few phrases synonymous with who we want to be as a team and as runners. And that emoji is the one that looks the closest to our logo. So just going off that, it was like, all right, we'll start using it. And now it's kind of synonymous with our group. And we see people tagging us in photos that are just like, throwing up the hand sign that we do and using that emoji and saying, keep the ball rolling and all these things that we've kind of set aside and carved out for ourselves as a team that kind of help us stand out in our training philosophy and the way we promote ourselves. So it's been cool to see people respond to both the logo and the team and everything in between.
Awesome. How's the sponsorship working at the team level and the individual level?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So we have a pretty unique setup since we're so new and a lot of us don't have representation. So Drew and Sam and Jordan are now represented by Flynn Sports, which is Ray Flynn's agency. Drew obviously is with Adidas. Sam has an individual contract with Adidas as well. Jordan actually just signed with Ray last week, I believe. So he's obviously looking to get something in the works for an individual deal. I'm represented by Josh Cox. And since Houston Half Marathon was when I signed on with him, and we've been working to get myself an individual deal. Adidas, since we're so new, is in kind of this weird area where obviously there's budgets at stake and they can't just carve out,
throw a bunch of money,
6-figure deal out of nowhere and be like, all right, here's your team funding, go make it work.
How do you think the deal with the Northern Arizona team with Hoka has, do you think that helps put you in a place where you can say, look, there's another team that's making $500,000 from sponsorship and it's working and they keep renewing the deal? Do you think that's helpful for you guys as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you look at the way elite distance running in the US is going, a lot of it is in groups now. Like there's a handful of guys who are able to make things work on their own because they have individual deals. But I think if you look at the vast majority of athletes coming out of the NCAA and the guys who are running well, it's men and women who are in a team setup and have support from teammates, from coaches, and a real environment where they can find success in their own right. So that definitely bodes well for us. I mean, we're optimistic that Adidas will come up big for us and see the value in who we are as a brand and what we bring to Adidas's brand. It's funny when, I'm wearing an Adidas Tinman shirt right now, and truly we printed on Adidas stuff because Drew has to wear Adidas stuff. It's either unbranded or Adidas. So it's like, okay, well, let's print on Adidas stuff. So obviously there's this association that we have with Adidas, and, we're fortunate that a lot of the guys on the team are getting some financial support from them in one way or another. And that's something that's been huge because, like I said, numbers are hard to just move around willy-nilly. So to have them already be supporting the team in any way is big for us. Individually, myself, I kind of opted out of the team support that Adidas was giving us right after Houston Half. That was a huge day for me, and I kind of evaluated my options and was like, okay, I think I'm at a point where I probably am deserving, quote unquote, of an individual deal, and whether that's Adidas or another company. Josh is pursuing all options, and so hopefully something will land here soon, and I'll be wearing a brand, whether it's 3 stripes or a swoosh or whatever the case may be.
Cool. So congrats on a good race at Boulder. That must have been a fun one, huh?
Yeah, no, that race was incredible. I've never really experienced anything like that, so it's cool.
Had you spectated it before?
Yep, so I spectated last year, and there's something obviously very different about spectating versus racing. You know, when you're spectating, you're seeing, you know, I think I saw the elites maybe 3 times out on the course, and each time you're part of the masses yelling at them.
Right.
You're just, you know, you feel like, oh, like I'm cheering for like Scott Fauble or whoever was in that elite field last year, and you're yelling your head off for him, and you don't really realize what a difference that makes when you're on the receiving end of it. So for me to go out and be racing on roads that, you know, I run, I bike, I drive on every day, and have some of the people I care about most out there on the streets alongside with, you know, thousands of people who've never met me before, but are just immediately latched
the
on
USA on you.
USA kit. Yeah, exactly. So it was cool.
So I talked with Caitlin Goodman afterwards, and she was like, that felt like the Olympics. Mm-hmm. What was it like coming into that stadium?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like I said, last year I spectated, and you can get some of the gravity of how big of an event this is, but I wasn't in the stadium for the finish, and, you know, I've heard all about it. But Jared Ward, in the press conference the night before the race, somebody asked him, like, when you're an Olympian, you can basically run whatever race you want, right? So why Boulder for him? And he said, coming into Folsom Field is louder by far than the finish of the Olympics marathon. And he was like, obviously there's the pride of running the Olympics, but the sheer
everyone's there for a reason.
Intensity of Boulder's finish is something unparalleled in our sport. So yeah, like I came into Folsom Field and I'm, you know, wearing the USA across my chest, and I kind of looked around and was like, all right, like there are way too many people in here for me to just put my head down and cross the finish line and go in and shoot. So I like look up into the crowd and I throw my arms up, and the stadium just erupts. And that was so cool. And it's pretty hilarious. You can go back and watch like the live broadcast, and I'm not on screen when I like pump up the crowd, but you can just hear the crowd noise. Like
it was really cool.
So that was something that like was very powerful for me. And again, to be wearing USA across my chest in any scenario is always something I don't take lightly, and I wear it with a lot of pride, but especially, you know, on Memorial Day at an event as large and as prestigious as Boulder was a really cool moment for sure.
Cool. So that was a good race. How do you come back from a race that isn't as good?
Yeah, good question. I would say I'm a very consistent racer. But as with anybody in the sport, obviously you have great days, you have good days, you have okay days, and you have bad days. So I would say I've had for sure a couple of bad days. I ran pretty poorly at Club Cross Country Championships this past December, and then had a rough go at a track 10K after Houston half at the Pacific Pursuit. So for me, it's really reinvesting in the reasons why I am a runner. You know, at the end of the day, it's fun to chase fast times and maybe make a little bit of prize money here and there, but you know, that's not why anybody starts this sport. So it's, you know, focusing in on my teammates and their successes and the things that we're doing together, whether it's training or working out or racing, just really reinvesting and leaning into them and the things that are making them excited. And then just trying to keep it like as simple as possible, like getting out the door and trying to, you know, put that performance out of your mind and just enjoy the act of running and just taking a moment to appreciate, you know, the fact that our bodies can allow us to do this day in and day out at a high level is really important to me. And I don't know, I think running's always been a little bit therapeutic for me. So, you know, after a bad race, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes of my run, I let myself dwell on that bad performance. And then I think as runners, we're inherently forward-looking people. So it's something that my mind just gravitates towards, well, what's next and how can I improve and what can I do better and go from there.
Cool. So Peter Bromka, who is a past guest on the podcast and was the fastest, until 2 days prior, was the fastest male or fastest runner in the Boston Marathon non-elite field. He ended up moving up. He wants to know what's it like to be in contention for national championships at races.
Yeah, good question, Peter. Thanks for asking. I read his article on, I think it was Tempo after Boston. It was a great read.
He's an amazing writer. Yeah.
He's very talented. But yeah, for me, it's something that it's very, I won't say unexpected, because, I'm a talented runner and I worked very hard at it. But, when I came out of high school, I was a walk-on at Drake. So initially in college, my goals were to make the scoring team for cross country at a mid-major Division I program. and now here I am 5-6 years later, and I'm very much in a conversation to be, podium or better at a U.S. championship. And it's special, that's something I don't take for granted. And it's something that I try and keep perspective on. And, when I show up at those big races and I'm going up against names that have been top dogs in high school and NCAA for years and years, and I'm kind of this relatively new face, it's invigorating. Like, I know that there's a real opportunity for me to go out there and knock off a lot of these guys. And that's something that as a competitor, I really lean into. There's an expression that I use a lot that's like the silent knife kills. So, you see a lot of kind of old names in the sport that people always go in and expect to see them do well. And to be on the opposite end of that spectrum and have nobody expect anything out of you, you can just go in and it's like, if you have a great day,
surprise,
no skin off your back, and it's a great story, and it's something that is really exciting for you. And it's slowly moving that needle so that, ultimately I hope I become one of those names that people are like, oh yeah, Reed, that guy's been crushing since he was 22. And then again, keeping that perspective and being like, yep, like I have been here for a while, but I'm still going to give my best on race day no matter what. So it's exciting, and it's something I'm still definitely getting used to a little bit, but it's becoming normal, which is exciting.
Cool. What tips do you have for high school cross country athletes in the off season, or really any athlete in the off season?
Yeah. Again, I kind of just touched on it, but like that, getting back to kind of your roots of the sport, for me, the summers were always a really good opportunity to really share in camaraderie with the people I was able to train with. So I spent 3 summers back home in Minneapolis training with my old high school team. Joe Klecker, who now runs at CU, is one of my high school teammates. And, we kind of grew alongside each other as runners. So I was fortunate that, when I got quote unquote good at Drake and was, doing workouts that were more like 6 to 8 mile tempos, averaging 5:15 pace or whatever, Joe was able to do that with me. And then I spent 1 summer out here training with the CU team. So it's finding what excites you about the sport, whether that's, crushing mileage or just getting out the door and moving your legs around and having some good conversations with your teammates. I would say one of the biggest things is patience. I think a lot of times, especially going into college or maybe coming off of a poor season in high school or in college or at any level of the sport, there's this innate reaction we have to be like, all right, well, I just need to work harder and double down on these things. But I think oftentimes, especially in college and high school, when you're racing damn near every weekend, it's the opposite. It's not that you didn't work hard enough. It's that you probably worked too hard and you're overraced and you're overtrained and you're fried. So I think it's important to take a step back and be like, all right, well, I'm just going to enjoy running for what it is and slowly build my way back into things, because October, November, whatever that meet or race that you're peaking for, that's the real goal, not destroying this month of training in
July. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, that'd be a good tip, and just, enjoy it.
Cool.
Soak it up.
Let's talk about the progression of miles from high school to college to post-collegiate. I think a lot of people are stuck on, or not stuck on, but fascinated with running as many miles as they can, which goes beyond what they actually can. So running more miles than they should, just because everybody else seems to be doing it. Let's talk about the progression of a high school athlete to being a college athlete to post-grad. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. I was fortunate to have a coach in college, Dan Hostegger at Drake, that was very holistic in his approach. He wasn't a get-rich-quick kind of guy. Right. He knew that I could be a great athlete over 4 years, but he didn't want to compromise that by pushing too hard in my first year. So in high school, I think the most miles I ran in high school was probably 45 to 50. And that was like a big week. And then my freshman year at Drake, probably got up to 60 to 65. And that was as, like a freshman 10K guy. and then progressed that pretty linearly until my junior year. I got up to 95 during like my heaviest training weeks. And then it was again as a pretty pure 10K runner in the NCAA. And then since I moved out here, altitude's definitely worth some mileage.
Right.
So it really hasn't gone up too much. I think the most I've done in a week has been 105. And that was probably this winter or last spring. I think I hit 105 a couple of times. But even still, like probably an average week for me is 85 to 90, which for a half marathon 10K guy isn't, a lot. And I think especially at the longer distance and higher levels of the sport, there's this obsession with that triple digit number where it's like as many weeks as you can get over 100, that's what's going to make a difference. And I just don't think there's a whole lot of truth to that. I think a number is a number and it's how you feel doing it. Like I would rather feel much better running 90 to 95 miles a week than killing myself to run 100 and 105.
Yeah, my coach always says the body doesn't know miles, the body knows stress.
Yep. And there's a lot of truth in that. And I think, there are some weeks where I run 90 miles and it feels great just because it's an easy week for me and I don't have a lot of outside stressors or my workouts aren't quite as tough. And then there's other weeks where it feels like I am working to get 85 to 90 miles in. And you look back and you're like, oh, well, I had, a lot of outside things going on, or I crushed my Friday workout and Saturday I just felt very lethargic and was running 740 pace. So I ran a mile shorter than I may have on another Saturday. And it's truly listening to your body and knowing what's right for you.
Cool. What's it like living in Boulder as a pro? We were joking that, or not joking that, when I went out for a run down near the reservoir, I, got passed by half dozen pros doing their thing on a Friday morning. What's it like being a part of that culture on a regular basis where everybody is excellent around you?
Yeah, and I think that's something that makes Boulder really special, and it's kind of why I think a lot of people get captured by this place and end up either moving to it initially or returning to it after a couple of years elsewhere. And for me, I was, like I mentioned, I trained with the Colorado team for the summer that I was out here, so I was fortunate that pretty immediately I was spending time around some of the best in Boulder between the runners at CU and then Emma Comer and Jenny Simpson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the important thing is that we're all runners. And I think every single runner, whether you're a 24-minute 5K runner or even slower or a 13-minute 5K runner or even faster, there's something universal about this sport and the reason why people pursue it. So that's what's been really special for me is sharing in that pursuit with a lot of the elites that call Boulder home. So yesterday we had a panel and a easy run from In Motion Running, which is a store owned by Mark Platches, who is an Olympic marathoner, who is kind of one of the stalwart Boulder guys alongside, Frank Shorter and these other guys that kind of were the first guard of the Boulder running scene. And now it feels like there's this new exciting energy coming up with, all these groups that are kind of sprouting up in Boulder. There's ourselves, there's the Nomad Distance Project, which is kind of our female counterpart. There are a lot of young, longer distance women who work full-time jobs and kind of make training work. And then, the kind of still, I guess, more household names of Boulder, like the Roots Running Project and Boulder Track Club that have had a little bit more history here and are still competing at high levels. So it's cool to see kind of this intermingling of the people who've been here forever and the people who are just sprouting up and how all of those groups are now getting along and the chemistry seems to be really good. So it's great that even in a place like this and in a sport that's this competitive and sometimes toxic, that groups are able to commingle and people by and large get along, and it's a whole lot of fun to be a part of.
It's cool to see, and it's cool that non-elites get to be a part of it as well. I felt the same thing in Flagstaff when I was out there in February, that everyone's just in it together and everyone is in it to help each other get better. It doesn't matter if, like you said, if you're a 13-minute 5K, if you're twice that, if you're three times that. I think that's the cool thing about running versus, you don't hear a lot of pro baseball players talking on podcasts that, it just doesn't happen. I think that the people that listen to podcasts, the people that follow you on Instagram, the people that tweet with you, things like that, it's aspirational, and they're looking to learn and get better, and they're not going to run as fast, but the lessons learned as by seeing the ups and downs that elites are showing and sharing, I think that's how everybody understands it. Like, it's not great all the time, and it's okay to suffer, and it's okay to not have good days. So how do you use social media to help, I don't want to say portray that, but highlight your journey and highlight day-to-day life as an elite athlete?
Yeah. And I think that's something that all of us have been really intentional about. Like I mentioned earlier, there's this perception that can oftentimes come from elites that it's only good days and it's only sunshine and rainbows, and
right.
They will post after a great race, but maybe just be radio silent after
right.
things don't go well. And that's something that we as a team really want to kind of flip the script on. Sure. I mean, even in like our first YouTube video after Peyton Jordan, Kyle Medina and Connor Winter both ran the steeplechase at Peyton, and it didn't go great for either of them. And instead of not interviewing them or having them interview and be like, I'll be back next time. Yeah. You just get very raw in their face, and they're like, this sport is brutal. Like, clearly I wasn't ready for this, and I need to go back to the drawing board and see what needs to change. Like myself, after Pacific Pursuit, which was the track 10K that didn't go well for me, I basically was like, I wasn't in the right headspace. Like, it's as simple as that. The sport is so mental, and you have to be prepared to go into that hurt locker, whether you're running 12-minute pace for a 5K or 4-minute pace. It doesn't matter. Like, it's gonna hurt the same, because as racing goes, you push yourself to your limit, and that's what's so pure about it, and that's what I think a lot of us love about it. But there are definitely days where you can't expect it to go well, and if you're not prepared to go into that sort of pain cave, then it's going to chew you up and spit you out. And so I think for all of us, it's painting that whole picture makes people realize that we are human and that we are going to fail, but then it makes those successes sweeter for us as individuals, but also for the people that are supporting us. It's
like a shared victory.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something that we think is really different. And that's what we can do well, is have people buy into this idea of runners as people, not just runners as kind of these kings and queens living in our ivory towers that come down from our altitude training camps and race 4 times a year and only get world standards, because that's not how it goes. I mean, ideally that's the way we would love it to be, but people get injured, people struggle mentally. There's all these things that add up to tough days. And, those tough days are often where we learn the most about ourselves as athletes and as people, and to shy away from those things and not share what we've learned, I think is doing a disservice to our supporters, but the sport as a whole. For sure.
So you've talked a little bit about the mental strength and the going into that hurt locker. That doesn't come naturally to most. I've been doing a lot of reading around peak performance and getting in that headspace, doing a lot of listening to sports psychologists and things like that. And I've seen progress personally through sort of not studying, but investing time into the mental side of things. Is that something that you guys are intentionally doing? Is it coming naturally? How do you work the mental side of the sport? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think there's no right answer for any person. Like running is, there's no recipe for success, and our heads are the same way. So if you talk to someone like Sam, who's very intentional about mental practice and mindfulness and meditation and how he can incorporate that into his training, for him, he'll tell you it's been a night and day change for him between practicing that intentionality and carving out time for himself to do visualization and positive self-talk and things like that have really led to a successful mindset for him. For myself personally, I think it's something that comes a little bit more, I won't say naturally, because obviously, I have to psych myself up, and I have things that I focus in on and these kind of mantras that I lean into when things get hard in racing.
Lean into is one that I love.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Bring on the pain.
Yeah.
Welcome it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's something, as a team and as individuals, especially for myself, that's been a huge growth and mindset shift. Is I think in my collegiate years, I was very much like proving to myself that I could be a good runner and that I deserved to compete alongside some of these big names. And now I have proven that to myself. And so it's being prepared to do that when I show up on race day. And so again, like knowing that it's going to hurt and knowing that if I can find a way to push myself, whether that's like picking a reason to run hard, like if it's for my teammates or if it's for my family or whatever the case may be, if it's for myself, if I want to be selfish on that day, you know, it's if you can prescribe a meaning greater than I want to have a good race today to your result, anytime you face that suffering, you face that pain, you're going to have a reason to push through it that's stronger than I want to have a good day today. And so I think for myself, that's been something that's been really important. And if I can find just one thing that I can hone in on for a race, and it can be something little, like this past week before Boulder, my left knee was having some problems, and I was, you know, in the pool for my workout on Tuesday, and I was like, man, I don't even know if I should race this thing. But I honed in on the fact that, you know, this was an opportunity for me to race in front of all of my teammates, and all of them were excited to watch me perform. And that was the thing that I dialed into was, you know, this is a home race for me. And I have, you know, teammates, friends, competitors, girlfriends, coworkers who are all going to be out on that course and looking to me to have a good day. And I owe it to them to get out there and compete my heart out. And that's all you can ask is, looking back on a race, did you work as hard as you could? And some days that means it's a bad day, but mentally you battled and it just wasn't there. And other days it means you battled the whole way and you came away with the shiny new PR or you hit all your goals. So I think it's as important as that, as just finding a reason to do what you're doing.
Cool. What are you thinking about on the start line?
Yeah, I try and be as calm as I can be. I mean, I know as soon as that gun goes, it's pure chaos and
elbows and all
exactly.
that good stuff.
So I try and just take 5 deep inhales and exhales and then shut my eyes and think about whatever my mantra was for that day. So for me in Boulder, it was one that my assistant coach at Drake often says, drive it like you stole it. And that's one that I often will use, especially if I know I'm going to be in a scenario where I'm going to be kind of going off of a pack or surging or dictating the pace. It's okay, drive it like you stole it. Like, don't shy away from being the one who's aggressive in the race, and don't shy away from pushing yourself perhaps harder than you thought you could, and just know that like you're choosing to be there and you're doing this to yourself. So if that's a conscious decision you've made, then do it as best you can and put the hammer down as hard as you can. So for me, it's just deep breaths, take a moment, drive it like you stole it, gun.
Cool.
And then just thinking through that as the race goes.
So, and then how do you balance that with, you know, the first mile was like a mid 4, like a 4:20, 4:30.
Yeah,
like
meters went out in 4:20.
Yeah. How do you not blow your race in the first, 30 seconds with something like that?
Mm-hmm. So I think I've always prided myself on being a smarter racer than a gutsier racer.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of people who will race like purely off heart.
Yep.
And sometimes that works incredibly well and other times it doesn't. So I think of a guy like Parker Stinson, who is notorious for just running how he feels.
Yep.
And sometimes to his own detriment and sometimes to his great success. And
Yep.
we've seen both sides of it recently. And I think Parker is someone who races with a lot of heart. And I think I'm someone who races with a lot of brains.
Are you watching splits?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like staring at my watch being like, okay, 4:39, I wanted to run 4:40 for this mile. I better back off a little bit, but I'm conscious of what my body feels like more than what a pace feels like. So for me, for Boulder, obviously it's altitude, it's hilly, it's turny. It's not a course where you're going to go out and expect to run a PR on, especially at an elite level. So for me, it was, I want to get through miles 3 and 4 feeling like I'm running a very hard tempo and then just hammer down as hard as I possibly can. And I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble in Boulder is they get caught up in that first mile or two of downhill and people hammering, and all of a sudden they're redlining and you just can't go into oxygen debt up here like you can at sea level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, I think I executed that plan perfectly. I basically got through the hill at mile 4 and was like, all right, I feel good. Like, I'm just going to smash this 5th mile and then see what I have left in 6. And I ran like 4:38, I think, for my 5th mile, which is my fastest split of the race. And then came back in like a 4:50 uphill for the last mile and felt really good about that. And was eating guys up and snuck from, I think, 5th or 6th American at 4 miles to the 3rd American at the finish. So to progress like that, and I think that's important when you have an opportunity to reach your goals, is setting a race plan that you know is attainable for yourself. And so, again, for guys who maybe race a little more gutsy and thrive off of a fast start, play to your strengths. For me, it's always been something where I know if I can feel good at halfway, I'm going to be able to work harder in the second half than I did in the first. And I'm not someone who can kind of get through halfway under pace and then be like, all right, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to keep hanging. Like, I kind of freak myself out when I know those splits are faster than I was hoping for. So to be patient and stick to your own goals is hugely important.
Cool. So for those who aren't familiar, there's a brutal hill at like basically mile 6 right before the finish. What recommendation or what tips do you have for someone who knows that there's something challenging in the race from a physical standpoint and it's going to hurt? Where do you go? What are you thinking as you're approaching a hill like that?
Yeah, so I'm a notoriously bad hill runner, but I caught 2 guys up that hill. And so I think it is a lot of times mind over matter. Like, if you can, it's a classic psychological trick. It's if you can tell yourself that you love running hills or you love hot, humid days or whatever the instance is that you know is going to hurt you most, if you can turn that thing that you're afraid of and that you know is going to cause you harm into something that you're anticipating and you're excited about. And even if you
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you know it's a mental trick, it's just reframing something that would typically be a negative experience or something that you're afraid of and positing it as something that you're excited about and you're looking forward to. And then all of a sudden you're halfway up that hill and you're like, oh, like,
we're there.
You
now
know,
we just need to not fall in this plastic.
Exactly. So it is very much a fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like, I'm not a great hill runner, and the Olympic trials marathon course looks to be very hilly.
Right. So
on paper, I should be petrified of that and be like, it's probably not going to be my day. But instead, I'm like, you know what? It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. It's going to be hilly. Like, every single person out there is going to hurt, whether they're a strong hill runner or they're a terrible hill runner. So if I can just be more excited about that pain than half of these guys, then I stand a very good chance to be highly competitive.
Cool. All right, we've got one more serious question before we dive into some fun ones here. One of the questions that someone wrote in is they want to know about your diet as a pro athlete. Is it something that you focus on? Is it, you're just eating everything because you're at altitude and you need the carbs? What's your approach when it comes to fueling and refueling?
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not the most particular about my diet. If you ask, some of the guys around the house, I definitely eat not the greatest, but I think I've definitely made a concerted effort to change that. So for me, I'm a man of routine and simplicity. So I have the same thing for breakfast virtually every day, just like a fried egg sandwich, some raspberries, a yogurt, and oftentimes a bowl of cereal. And lunch is, especially when I was working, it was virtually the same every single day because it's easy. And that was a turkey sandwich with cheese and spinach, some potato chips, some frosted mini wheat, and a yogurt.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So it's not something that I'm overly concerned about. I think I've always been pretty laissez-faire with what I eat. I mean, I know what my body needs and I know what my body craves. And I think as runners, it's easy to be, almost too caught up in that. And certainly I'm not advocating that everyone eats Five Guys burgers and fries every night for dinner as they've had a hard workout in that day, just because that's not healthy. But I do think there's room in this sport and in our diets in general as human beings to kind of have space carved out for, the meals that are going to be healthy and nutritional and help you recover and support the training that you're doing. But then I think, as in anything, like, balance is important. So, if I'm craving some ice cream after a hard workout, I'm going to go get some ice cream after a hard workout. And I'm not going to be like, I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. That basically just undid my hard workout. I think that's a bad headspace to be in. So for me, it's something that I am conscious about, but I'm not overly conscious about.
Cool. That segues into our first fun question of what are your top 3 cereals?
It's a good question. I think Fruit Loops are always going to be one of my go-tos.
Good one.
They're just delightful, and they remind me of my childhood because that was like, my parents were not sugary cereal people. Like my mom especially was like, nah, you're not going to eat that garbage. So whenever I would get like a special treat cereal, it would be Fruit Loops.
All right, so Fruit Loops number 1.
Fruit Loops. I really enjoy Special K and like Honey Bunches of Oats. That's kind of my like quote unquote healthier cereal.
Got it.
And then I've been crushing Oreo O's lately.
Ooh.
Yeah, which are, I think they're newish. I'd never seen them when I was a kid, but they're a real treat. They're basically like chocolate Fruit Loops with a little bit of like cookies and cream
That's
dust
nice.
on
Does
them.
it make the milk nice and chocolatey?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
All right, Christine Thorne, who you may know, says,
I'm familiar.
Are you superstitious or just a little stitious?
Definitely just a little stitious. So thanks for asking that, Christine. We're big office people. So just a little stitious. She knows me well. I'm not the kind of person who's like big on these like hyper-focused routines that I need to do on race day. I used to eat like a cheeseburger and fries the night before a race, which I would feel is usually not what people look for. But for me, it was like safe and easy to get. So that used to be kind of one of the traditions I would have. But now, as you know, I'm road racing and traveling around the country, it's a lot of times you're eating at hospitality meals. So it's, you know, pasta or whatever the case may be, and you're not quite as picky. But I don't have lucky socks or a gold chain that I wear or any special thing that I do. So I'm just a little stitious.
Cool. All right. Everyone on Tinman has to be one character from Marvel.
Oh, God.
All right. What do you got?
I saw this one. So Jeff has to be Hawkeye because they have the same haircut in Endgame. Not a spoiler. Let's see. Sam is probably going to be, I don't know. This is going to be a long, hard question for me to answer.
We've got all day.
All right, I'll skip Sam for now. Drew is going to be Thor, but only Thor in Endgame, which is also maybe a spoiler, maybe not.
I'm going to have to put a disclaimer on this one. Do not listen to this
Drew
podcast.
hasn't even seen Endgame yet, so that's okay.
We could talk about it. I'm kidding.
Joey's probably like Loki or someone kind of like goofy and tricky. Tyler's got to be Hulk just because he's short and stocky and a badass. Who's Captain America? Connor Winter is Captain America. Wears leather, drives a motorcycle.
Classic.
He's just pure Americana. Kyle is probably... Oh, Sam's Tony Stark. I can't believe I didn't think of that.
This might be harder than your workout today.
It definitely will be harder than my workout. Kyle is maybe Ant-Man. He's got like some sneaky funny jokes, but he's like always around. I don't know. That might be all I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, that's good enough. We have another one here. Who would win in a fight using only socks filled with quarters, Brogan or Reed?
I guess that one came from Brogan Austin, just on a whim. Brogan which is
hilarious to like think about. If you're just slapping someone with a sock filled with quarters.
I would have to say Brogan. Good job, Brogan. You asked a good question that makes you be the winner. Well done.
Because he made his way onto the podcast.
Yeah, he snuck his way on. No, because he comes from a wrestling background, and he's definitely stronger than me. So I think he would be more tactical, and also his hits would carry a lot more weight behind them.
Nice.
So
there were about a dozen more of these types of questions. So I think it's just the perfect example of the fun that you guys are having and and the audience that you sort of bring to the table. And I think the sport needs that. And I think the new, I don't want to say new wave, but I guess the new wave of runners coming out of college and things like that, as well as established veterans, like having fun is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And I think that if you're serious all the time with training, like when it's not going well, you don't have anything to turn to.
Yep.
So what are some of the other things that Tinman does to keep it light and keep it fun? Do you have, weekly whatever nights, things like that?
Yeah. So to start, basically the entire team lives together. So we have 5 of us
Like
in
a frat house?
Yeah, essentially. No, so Drew owns a house just up in North Boulder here that 5 of us live in, and then 4 of the other guys just rented a house that's about a half-mile away. So obviously, it definitely has that kind of like college environment where at any given moment you could show up at Drew's house and there's 2 to 10 teammates just sitting around and talking. And that I think is a big thing for us. I think we're not the kind of people who are afraid to have conversation with each other, and we're not the kind of people who like at any given moment will just like pull out our phone and shy away from social interaction. Yeah. We really enjoy each other's company, and that makes training and racing and every single day fun with these guys for me. And I think everyone would agree with that. It's something that we don't have organized team nights, but probably 3 nights a week, just organically. 3/4 of the team will end up like grilling out at Drew's house or coming over to watch a track race or play Settle Reserve Catan or whatever it's going to be. Like there's just, we all enjoy each other's company and really like spending time with each other. So a lot of times it'll be like we're hanging out and they're like, oh, well, what do we want to do tonight? Let's figure it out. So it's been a whole lot of fun, and that trend will continue as we continue to grow as a team and grow into each other and add new guys and all of these things. So it's a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, it's been fun to follow on social, and on that note, where can we find you and where can we find Tinman?
Yes, I'm at Reed Fish, ReedFisch on Instagram and Twitter, and then we are at Tinman Elite on all social platforms, and then you can head to our site, which is tinmanelite.com, and our YouTube channel, which is Tinman Elite, and we've kind of got all the social covered. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Reed, thanks so much for doing this, and enjoy the rest of the day here.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.